and welcome to MotorInc First. Once again, I have the opportunity to ask Shumi about what he's been up to. We know what he's been up to and what you've been waiting for, but the details. We're talking about the Triumph Scrambler. No, we're not talking about the Scrambler.
We'd love to, but the bike's not ready.
Only the Speed 400 for
That's
now.
right.
But you did see the Scrambler? I mean,
No. So we're not going to go into the Scrambler 400X in a lot of detail because display models were there. And as far as I can tell, they looked larger than the Speed 400 in size, and it's a little bit more of a presentable machine, let's call it. It's a little larger, has a little bit more presence. But first, we are going to get the Speed 400s.
right?
And the 400Xs will come, I think, about 2 or 3 months after.
Okay.
At that point, somewhere along the way, we'll get to ride that machine. Then we'll discuss it.
So as of now, the bookings that open were only for the Speed 400.
No, bookings are open for both.
Oh, bookings are open
Deliveries will only start for the 400 first. The Scrambler X will follow.
All right.
What we've ridden today, the bike we're going to discuss is just the 400. We can make some intelligent guesses about what that might mean for the 400X, but we haven't ridden that motorcycle.
Okay, so the Focus is Speed 400. It's a interesting name and a very good-looking motorcycle. So I think it's got a lot of people interested there, and then came the price.
Yeah.
So I think the excitement just shot through the roof.
Yeah.
How high were your expectations?
I think when we discussed it the last time, we were talking about 3 lakh rupees-ish.
Yeah.
Right? Because what I think Triumph has gotten right off the bat, and especially when you see the Harley-Davidson as a backdrop to it, the X440, is it looks good.
Right.
It looks like it's finished well.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it looks like an international motorcycle rather than something created here for us.
Correct.
What is impossible to see, because they were all more or less studio shots, is how large the motorcycle is. Right. So to me, I think the gap will be when they see it for the first time. I don't think a lot of people will be expecting that motorcycle to be as small as it feels when you are standing close to it, which is why a lot of guys who came back from the press conference said the Scrambler 400X looked better to their eyes. And I think what they were talking about is the size difference, not the styling difference.
The difference in size is largely down to the fact that it's a taller motorcycle. The tank and all is...
Yeah, so I think most of the bodywork is common. It's slightly, it's higher on its suspension, as it were. There is a small amount of difference in the wheel travel, as it were, plus the 18-inch front wheel, which, remember, when we saw the Hunter for the first time, we understood how much of a difference that makes. So I think it's a combination of all of these things together that gives the Scrambler more
and the
presence.
wider bars as well.
Yeah. I think there is also the factor of people who are excited about the motorcycle but can't have one, so therefore that's the more exciting motorcycle. So I think if the 400X and the 400 were both on sale together, then I don't think we hear so much chatter about, oh, the 400X is like the more special one. I think then it'll be a little bit more even. But just the fact that that is an obtainium by another 2 months, I think adds to its charm. Yeah.
For now, yeah. I had very high expectations.
And well, you did ride it for a very, very brief period. And
I think it's not what I expected it to be.
what were you expecting it to be?
So for me, I was expecting this to be a bit more classic in its performance, right? I was expecting it to be a bit more easygoing, a bit more polished, maybe, if I may call it that. You know, going by how it looks and it's a Triumph. And in my head, I thought of the Street Twin a lot when I kept looking at this motorcycle, right? And the Street Twin is such a beautiful bike to ride.
Right.
You know, just so easy, torquey, smooth, right? This has a different persona. At least that's the quick impression that I got.
No, I think we rode the motorcycle 150 kilometers in total. Okay, Rishabh picked up the motorcycle from the Chakan plant, which is outside Pune, rode it down to our office in Mumbai. We had a little bit of time with the motorcycle in the studio, and then I rode it back about 50-60 kilometers to the place where we were supposed to return this bike in Khopoli. And you rode it, I think, around the office building, maybe a kilometer and a bit, max. And we all reached the exact same conclusion. So I think it's pretty accurate what you just said. What I enjoyed about riding the Speed 400 is that it's an easygoing, pleasant motorcycle. Now, easygoing and pleasant is a middle path. And I wish Triumph had chosen anything but the middle path in some ways, because what he's saying is absolutely spot on. And I'm amazed that in a kilometer and a half, he cottoned onto it so accurately, right? Which is why I love you riding motorcycles so much. But it's that. It revs a little bit too quickly to be a genuine retro. There's a vibration in your heels about 4,000 RPM that you won't really complain about. By 5.5, 6,000 RPM, it's noticeable vibration. It's still not something you'd complain about. But when you start getting past that, remember this thing has what? A 10,000 RPM red line. It's very hard to tell what the red line is because you need a microscope to see the rev counter because it's just hidden away from you. And the assumption I assume would be that there's so much torque, it's so easy going, the power band is so linear, you won't need the rev band. And in one way you don't, it's a bad thing, and complain so much to get past, say, 6.5, 7,000 RPM, that there is performance there, but it strongly discourages you from using it. So that 40 bhp on the spec sheet, it's the biggest number on the spec sheet that I find hard to use in the real world.
Can I tell them what happened?
Sure.
So like we had this chat, and usually it's like until we have ridden the bike, we won't really discuss it in detail that much. But I was so taken aback by the Speed 400. So when Shumi came into the office and we started talking, I just kind of blurted out what I thought. And then he took the bike and he left for Kapoli to return the bike. And then I was just waiting for him to get there so that we could talk. We ended up speaking for 2 hours because I was like, but the one question that remained was that, okay, maybe I did get a part of it wrong. You know, that, maybe it's called the Speed 400. It's not called the Street 400, right?
Maybe it should have been called the Street 400.
Huh?
Maybe it should have been called the Street 400.
And that was the thing. I was like, maybe it's got that character, right? Is that young, energetic motorcycle? And then we spoke for 2 hours to get that down.
Yeah. And that's the thing about it. So, you know what I tell you I keep doing? I'd go out onto the highway while I'm testing a brand new machine with knowing nothing about it. You just focus on the feelings and you come to a place where the motorcycle feels the best settled. This is the fastest speed at which the motorcycle settles down and carries a pace, right? The Speed 400 does that at about 100, 105. Beyond that, you have a sense of strain because the levels of vibration are beginning to rise. Below that, you have a feeling that, hey, I can go faster. But if you remember when we rode the Gixxer 250s at the BIC track, you remember we all came back and saying the power band is so linear that there is a chance that this motorcycle will be boring outside, and then it turned out to be slightly dull to ride. I have a feeling that a lot of riders will reach that conclusion. But here's the thing. A new rider coming up from a 150, 200 into this motorcycle will enjoy the fact that there is additional performance, but there is no step in the power band. It makes the motorcycle very easy to ride and get along with and all of those things. I'm not convinced that 6 months down the line, a year down the line, when you've become familiar with the motorcycle, that lack of a step in the power will continue to make this that engaging a motorcycle. And that's why I keep saying maybe they should have taken a stand.
They should have taken
a stand, not the middle path. Either it should have been a lot more torquey and given up the top end, or gone for the top end and given up the bottom a little bit, rather than this very linear curve. Because I think about a year and a half down the line, I think we'll start getting people who may not articulate it because buyer's remorse is a real thing, but I think people who'll be like, I need to move on from this motorcycle.
You know what I was thinking? Two things that I was thinking about when you were saying all this. One, would it be fair to say that this is sounding and feeling like what the 250s did when we were moving to the Duke, like, you know, where the Duke 250 sat?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you had the 390 Duke, which was something else. And the 250 was like the sweet spot between the 200 and the
That's right.
390. This is sounding like that. Like
It
the
is.
sensible kind of bike.
It is a parallel that I hadn't drawn until you pointed it now, but you're right. What we like about when we recommend the Duke 250 to someone is saying you're taking a big step up in power. Here's a motorcycle that will make it easy for you to deal with that extra performance. I think this motorcycle is going to be similar, except for the fact that Triumph isn't making it rip-roaring amazing when the revs come up. It's a little strained at those revs, and to me, that's what's gone missing, right? So think about it. It says 4-valve, DOHC, liquid-cooled, 40 bhp, but it's that part of the performance is not delivered saying, yeah, take it, I've got lots.
So you know what I did, right, that day? I put up that post saying that looking at the price that this is at, this is doing exactly what the 390 Duke did.
Yes.
10 years ago.
Yes.
Right? And on paper, it seems like it is that with 4 bhp less, which is like, all right, take it. You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
If for being 80,000 bucks cheaper than a 390 Duke, you're getting 90% of the bike.
Up on the spec sheet, yes.
But then this was a complete surprise.
It was a complete surprise because when I went down the highway, the dry sections, and I like tried to rev it out and go a little bit faster, and I kept settling back to 110, 105. Whereas if I recall the Duke 390, 3 bhp more, it seems to settle at 130, 35 with that same kind of, yeah, everything is cool, just go. And to me, I think it's under the performance that everybody's expecting. So depending on your frame of reference, if you've been riding a really small bike, this will obviously feel very powerful and very nice. But if you've ridden a few fast machines before, this may not be as impressive as you think. And honestly, again, I don't think that's a bad thing.
And it's not a slow bike either,
It's
right?
not a slow bike.
Right.
It doesn't feel fast. And there's a fundamental difference between feeling fast and being fast. So when we do this numbers, when we test it with VBox or whatever, I'm sure the numbers will be actually pretty good. But does it feel like that?
Does it feel like it's doesn't want to be revved out?
Yeah.
It is.
That's the thing. So up to about, that's what I said, about 6,500 RPM, things are okay. But from then onwards, if you stay at 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, it feels like it's screaming and it's like, oh, come on, why are you doing this? And you can hear it. If you listen to the GoPro footage carefully, you can hear the noise of the engine in the footage, and it's not a nice noise. I would not be able to sit at 7,000 RPM all day, but on a 390 Duke, you'd do that the whole time. On a Harley-Davidson X440, where the red line is only 6,000, you can sit at 5,200 the whole day. It doesn't complain. It's that close to the red line, no stress. This one does.
All right. Okay, you brought up the X440, so I'm dying to go there. But before we get there, a lot of motorcycles that we've got in the recent past, you know, starting with the Super Meteor, right, which were very promising on paper, great engine spec, but where it went terribly wrong was with the suspension.
Yeah.
What's the scene here?
This bike will show you how suspension is done.
Oh.
It's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so it's got a pretty basic setup, right? It's not KYB Showa, it's endurance, running a USD fork in the front and a preload adjustable monoshock at the rear. And the moment you sit down on it and you hit your first pothole, you know you've struck gold. And not the slightly yellow gold that it's got on the outside of the fork. I wish it was a little bit classier, but it really, really is good suspension. So you, on a nice concrete road where there are lots of small bumps, it eliminates that process completely. You never feel them at all.
So it's a nice bike on that
It's
front.
a really nice bike. Not going to say nice. I'm going to say it's a really, really nice bike. It's a really impressive setup. So when you take a big hit, it's like something took care of it. I didn't have to deal with it. So do you get feedback? Yes. Do you feel connected to the experience? Yes. But is it jarring? No. And it would take a massive, like a rim-breaking hit for you to actually feel something, is what it feels like the suspension might be able to pull off. So it's actually incredibly good suspension.
So in that sense, the Scrambler is very promising then.
Depends on your expectation. If you're going to say that the Speed 400 is so good that 10 mm of extra suspension travel in the front and 20 at the back is going to change my life, no, not really. Is it going to be therefore a genuine off-roader? I would say the marketing needs to stop and expectations need to be set correctly. This is already a very good bike. I assume the 400X will be an even better bike, but now it's diminishing returns. It's not going to be like, wow, mind blown. This is already so good.
Right. And given the engine character, the Scrambler won't really be, I mean, if you want to scramble, then it's
Yeah, so look, machines we rode were early machines. And I'm not going to take the fact that it struggled so much with the high rev performance very, very seriously just yet. Let the bike stabilize a little bit. I mean, the bikes weren't like box fresh. I think our bike had 1,000 kilometers on it already before it came to us. So I know that they were running. But did I feel happy about high rev performance? No. Is the bottom end performance outrageously good? Also no, because of the linearity of the power band, right? So will the Scrambler be a dramatically changed experience? I think a lot of us would just go down the sprockets, trade off some of the top speed ability, and then get, I think, what would feel like a more characterful motorcycle out of it. But the suspension inarguably is the highlight of this motorcycle. It's just so good. So the brakes are good, they're decent. Ground clearance, I know they have a lot of issues with it because the numbers haven't been announced. Triumph didn't give the numbers. That's usually a flag. A manufacturer that gets a decent GC will usually talk about their ground clearance, and Triumph hasn't. But I didn't scrape a thing.
because the coolant reservoir is also all the way down there.
Yeah, so, but I didn't scrape a thing. I didn't really worry about it. And what we said, I think in one of the shots where we were talking about braking rims, about the KTM, I think it is, we said brake before the bump and then accelerate gently over it. Works both for potholes and crests like speed breakers. In both cases, you're trying to lift the front up a little bit and create ground clearance. So it's not like a static quantity and you can't work around it. So honestly, put a little bit of effort into it and you'll never worry about ground clearance again.
Okay. Practical stuff.
Practical stuff.
City friendly.
It should be. Like I said
I
in
know
the
you've not.
yeah, like I said in the beginning, we only rode it for 150 kilometers, most of it wet highway miles, some corners. So I know that the handling feels like it's a little tippy, like the Apollos are a little sharp. You remember how the Apollos are at the beginning, right? So the contour is a little sharp. So it feels like it flicks into the corner,
Right.
which for an experienced rider is a good thing. For a new rider, it might be a source of fear initially until they get used to it. But I don't see any reason why I would say there is something wrong with the handling of this bike. I think it'll just do the job really well. Did I get the sense that it was exciting? No, I think the handling is more like the engine than the ride quality in that sense. So I think it's a nice, calm,
So
pleasant,
everything is
supportive.
lining up.
Yeah,
Nice bike.
it's a nice bike, you know. So I'd like to tell you that this is an amazing bike that will change the face of this market. And in sales terms, maybe it might. But in terms of what motorcycles represent to us, no, it's
Do you
not a
have an image in your head as to who you would recommend this to?
somebody very mild. Somebody who doesn't really ride their bike very fast, has some amount of motorcycle experience, is looking for what feels like a high quality product that will last a long time and do a large number of jobs without having to put too much effort into anything. It's that bike. It doesn't ask for much. And then it'll do all of those jobs reasonably well. The one thing it'll do exceptionally, obviously, is suspension. It also looks good. What most people don't realize is it's actually small. It's not appearing small. So when you sit down, your heels are wider than your knees. So you sit in this position. That's not a very masculine way to sit. Like whereas the Harley Davidson sort of sits you like this, where your knees are wider than your heels, you immediately feel like I'm on a more substantial machine. So the Triumph will never feel substantial. It's not a bad thing. It
Right.
means, I don't know, you're going up the Khardungla and there's mud on the road and it's snowing, and your motorcycle will assume the nature of a toy where you don't worry about it too much. That's the pro of it. The con of it is every day when you're riding it, it'll feel like, oh, I bought a 400 and now I've arrived in the big bike class. It's going to feel a little weak on that front. But what Triumph does so well now, and I think all the manufacturers out there can learn from Triumph, is how to keep the cost in control while keeping all the small bits at a very high design level. And that gives the motorcycle this sense of being premium, right? So if you look at the Husqvarna, which was like a design first, and the Triumph next to each other, the Husqvarna looks like some children made it in a backyard somewhere, right? All Triumph did was tuck all the wiring away, so the engine is clearly visible. All the lines are neatly done. All the little details are taken care of, and it immediately elevates your experience as saying, "Wow, world-class motorcycle."
It felt like it belonged in a showroom where you would have the bigger speed or the scramblers, right? They could sit next to them and you wouldn't be embarrassed about it, saying that hey,
Exactly.
this is a 2 lakh and that is a 12 lakh machine.
Yeah.
And they sit next to each other.
Exactly
And
that.
that was incredible. I think great point. Imagine if we could get that quality on everything else in that price range.
And I don't see why not, right? It's just because Triumph has learned to pay more attention to the details than other guys. And if you think about it, Triumph, what, 8 years ago, wasn't being able to execute motorcycles like this. At some point, watching the Italians do things, you know how a German heel plate or a Japanese heel plate is here, here's a heel plate, whereas the Italian one is like designed and there's chamfering on the edges and stuff. It's just that much of attention to detail work. And obviously, Triumph have promoted and prompted Bajaj engineers to stick to that brief and do careful part by part detailing.
Right.
And it adds up.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is rocket science. I don't think there's any reason why Hero couldn't have done it for the Harley Davidson, or KTM can't do it for their KTMs, etc., etc.
Okay, that's the third reference to the Harley Davidson, so we have to go there. You've ridden them practically back to back.
Yeah,
People are comparing them left, right, center.
right.
Should they?
I think the Harley Davidson has a lot more character, and it feels more like a genuine Harley Davidson created by Hero. Whereas the Triumph, I'm not going to say it's untriumphy, but it's not a very characterful motorcycle. It's a reasonably calm experience with not a lot of highs, not a lot of lows, and it sort of flows. In my experience, motorcycles that have highs
That
and
rhymed.
uh,
Sorry.
in my experience, motorcycles that have highs and lows create a more memorable experience. So I wish, literally what I said in the beginning, I wish Triumph hadn't taken the middle path so strongly.
Right.
And if they had to do this, then the high rev performance needed to have been more robust and a lot more like, yeah, I got this. 10,000 RPM, sure, why not?
Yeah. It doesn't feel like it went whole hog there or here.
Yeah.
It's just
So I think
somewhere in between.
yeah, so a lot of people will be very happy to live with this motorcycle. If your expectations are low, it will obviously exceed your expectations. If your expectations are sort of in the middle zone, and I don't know why they should be that low, I think you'll be okay with this bike. But if you have high expectations from this machine, keep your pre-booking, but until you test ride, don't decide. Right? Now, just to get the logistics out of the way, the 2.23 lakh ex-showroom price that they announced, we never even considered because we knew it would get done in
Done
the
soon.
first,
Yeah.
I think, week, 2 days or 3 days or whatever. So today it's at 2.33 lakhs ex-showroom, which is an incredible price. There was some controversy about some Triumph dealers offering a price with a delivery charge of 17,000
Almost.
rupees
Yeah.
and something.
Yeah.
We officially knew that day when that happened, that the weekend, the following weekend, and then maybe Monday or Tuesday was when the official on-road price Bajaj would have communicated to these dealers. So I don't know that that was real. But obviously, since there are 10,000 pre-bookings, etc., now the dealers are thinking that they can make a little bit of a margin on this by doing these kind of things, and it's unfortunate. On the other side, Hero and Harley have done the smarter thing by saying they'll roll it out to a whole bunch of different kinds of dealers. At least you have access while the Harley-Davidson network grows or whatever. Whereas Triumph is doing the opposite, where they're saying we have a core network of 15, 16 dealers, whatever it is. And then they'll expand this network as fast as possible. And they think they're trying to do 100 by March. So initially, getting delivery of your Speed 400 will be challenging unless you already live where the Triumph dealers are, which is the same situation as the Highness faced.
Right. The big wings.
Which is also perhaps the reason why when Bajaj was talking about the production plans, they have the new plant, 30,000 capacity today, 25,000 of those are going to KTMs, and only 5,000 Triumphs will be made. And the reason is not because I think they were expecting super low demand, but I think they just have very few showrooms to deliver these out of, so there's no point making too many motorcycles. They will also supply parts to the Thailand and Brazil factories
Oh,
to
really?
Triumph for export. So the
Oh,
Indian
cool.
bikes are not currently being exported, and there is a small difference there. One difference obviously is the sari guard and crash bar, etc., etc. But the other difference is that the wheels that the international models get are lighter than the Indian wheels.
Ah.
And this bike will be running Metzeler M9 RRs in those markets, if I remember correctly, whereas we get Apollo H1s. And what Triumph said is they've readjusted the suspension to offer the same experience in both the countries with those road conditions in mind.
Okay.
Right? So I'm assuming that the amount of oil in the fork, for example, is slightly different in India. It's slightly less or slightly more or something like that. That's a minor difference to just adjust the suspension out. But however they've done it, the suspension to me is the highlight of this experience.
On that note, talking about tires, these are W-rated alphas, right?
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Dukes have been getting H's for ages now, the 390. So that's great to see W's back on these
Yeah,
motorcycles.
and we know already that the Alpha H1 is a pretty spectacular tire. So we know that that's a great tire. But the sizes are in the same ballpark of the KTM Duke. So that
Yeah.
also means that you have the option of going much further up. So the TVS Eurogrip Pro Torque Extreme is a fantastic tire if you want to go there. The Road 5 is another fantastic tire. So this bike will not only have alphas to start with, it will also have a lot of options straight off the bat.
Okay. If I have to push, somebody wants, I mean, invariably, what a lot of people are doing is touring, right? And would you see this as a comfortable tourer? And would you say that this is a motorcycle that maybe for taller people will, because you've said it's small, how would it work? Is it that small that it'll be an issue?
Look, I think it will tour, and I think it will tour really well. Because the nature of the engine says, yes, you can tour. The mood will be peaceful. So despite 40 bhp and 37 Nm or whatever, I'm not going to call it a sport tourer. Neither, for that matter, would I call the X440 a sport tourer. They're not fast motorcycles. They are competent motorcycles. So put luggage on, wind it up, sit at 100 all day, no stress at all. Space-wise, touring-wise, you'd notice that the seat is kind of narrow, side to side. So initially, it felt like my butt cheeks were sort of hanging off the side a little bit.
Oh,
Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should do that. So initially, it felt like the seat was almost too narrow.
okay.
But was I in any discomfort an hour and a half later into the ride? Not at all. So I think this will make a reasonable tourer just as it is. Obviously, people will say, oh, you need a screen to go touring. And I think there is an accessory screen that will come. But if you're going to sit at 100, 110 all day, I don't know that a screen is going to make that much of a difference, honestly. I think the headlight might be your thing to think about.
Okay.
It got pretty dark on the way out, monsoon dark, not evening dark, and the headlight made no dent at all. So I have a feeling that this is not like a Bajaj headlight, which are usually super brilliant and powerful. I don't think this is quite that. This is a little bit weaker. So if you're going touring, you might want to think about aux lights.
Okay.
Is there space for luggage? Yes. Will you be able to take pillion and luggage and go touring? No, small motorcycle, think of an ADV instead. In terms of performance, if you think about it, a 250cc V-Strom or KTM Adventure will hold similar speeds down the highway with a lot more space. So that's what I'm a little bit disappointed about. I wish this motorcycle just had a little bit more dum.
Okay. Last question before we move to the questions that you've shortlisted from what everybody's asked. Classic comparison.
I think they're dramatically different motorcycles. Okay, in terms of character, the Classic is the typical Royal Enfield kind of motorcycle with all of the annoyances removed. So it's very slick, it's very easy to ride, there's lots of torque, you don't have to change gears much and all of those things. But when you open the throttle on a Classic, you do get that sense of wow, torque, and it's moving forward now. I think the Speed 400 will be significantly quicker than this Classic, but it won't feel like that push happened. It'll feel like somehow speed is being gathered and it's going really well. So in terms of character, again, I think the Harley X440, the Classic 350 are very, very powerful, characterful machines. And I think this one is a little bit more bland in personality. But in terms of competence, I don't have an issue. This is the suspension in the class. So the Classic 350 has its own way of doing things. It sort of hammers the road out of the way. This thing is like light-footed, almost modern in that sense, very sophisticated feeling.
Oh, wow, man.
So they've really got that part right. Does it sit with the character of it being portrayed as a retro? We can argue. Okay. To me, if they had called it the Street 400, right? Or the Sporty 400 as opposed to their Sport 400 referring to their old bikes and Street somehow referring to their new bikes. It's kind of confusing in there. But if they'd called it, let's say the Daytona 400, just to make a point, not to make a fairing, just to make a point. If they'd called the Daytona 400 and had this suspension on it, I'd say as a real world sports bike with this kind of suspension, you'd be doing pretty well.
And in the Classic comparison, the only thing that I would like to add is that the one thing I said to him when I first just got on the bike was I was expecting a more heavy crank feel,
Yes.
right? That slight, that sense of, calm, measured kind of style of riding, which the Classic has.
Yes.
Which the bigger Triumphs, like if you ride the Street Twin, the Thruxton, even which is Thruxton is supposed to be sporty, and it's fun to ride, but it has that heavy crank feel to it.
Correct.
Which this doesn't. This to me, it had that sporty-er feel to it.
Yeah, this is like a normal 40 bhp street bike wearing old clothes.
Correct. Okay, so we're going to get to the questions. Are you
All
game?
right.
Okay. So this is from Arun Kumar Selva. He's asked, what's your gut feel on how the motorcycle will age?
I think it'll age really well. It didn't feel like a low quality motorcycle to me. It didn't feel like there were build quality or finish level issues. So I suspect that you'll be fine. It didn't feel, I know what you're actually asking. You're saying, it's a Bajaj product and Bajaj products have a reputation for aging. So will
Don't
this
buy the first lot.
age? So I would say still don't buy the first lot.
Oh.
Yeah, look at it. Look at the number of variables in there, right? Brand new design, brand new collaboration, brand new factory, brand new
fair
technology. I'd just avoid the first batch. It's just safer to do it. I'm not anticipating a problem, but if there is a problem, it will happen then, right? So to me, just avoid the first batch anyway. But I think Triumph did a lot of quality control work on this motorcycle to make sure it meets their standard. And I think it shows in the motorcycle somewhat. So I'm not expecting that this will age. And if you look at the new Pulsars, their quality levels have gone up considerably over the old Pulsars. So I think Bajaj has also come a long way. So I don't think this is a genuine concern.
Okay, awesome. From Abhishek Mehra, Triumph Speed 400 or the Harley X440, which one will have better after sales services? Or should he just skip it and go for the KTM Adventure or the G310, GS310, 310 GS for city and highway rides?
The reason why we hesitate to recommend the BMW GS is mostly because the service costs are not even in the ballpark of all of these machines. Okay, it's much more expensive. We found out what we could. The Harley-Davidson should cost you about, I'm going to say 4,500 rupees a year. It's one service. 10,000 kilometer service interval. Now the Triumph thing is a little bit tricky because they say 16,000 kilometer interval, but it's still an annual service. So unless you're really riding 16,000 kilometers every year, or at least 10,000 plus, you're not going to see a benefit from it.
Correct.
So in that sense, the Harley-Davidson and the Triumph both will require service once a year. I think the Triumph service is about 500 rupees more expensive at the maximum. It's not wildly more expensive. And I think the Royal Enfield service is 2,400-ish, but 2 times a year, because it's every 5,000 kilometers. So that also adds up to about this. So to me, all of these three motorcycles service-wise, you're going to get to about 4,500 rupees-ish per year. The Royal Enfield service network is much larger today. So initially, at least, they will have a quite a big advantage. And this is an advantage that is not easy to cover up even with time. So there will be a lot of time before there are enough Harley guys, hero guys out there who can service your X440. And there's, I think, going to be an even longer period of time before there are enough Triumph guys out there to deal with your Speed 400 and whatever else is coming from this platform.
All right. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one. Techno Babel has asked, will these bikes be easy to live with every day or will they be weekend warriors?
No, I think these will all be very, very easy to live with every day. Just remember that when you're stepping up into the 400cc class, you are riding physically larger machines with more performance. So there will be an adjustment period, but I think most of us will adapt really well because none of these manufacturers have made it a truly difficult to ride motorcycle.
Right.
In fact, if anything, why we have difficulties recommending 390 Duke is that for the performance it has, it's almost too easy to ride and therefore get yourself into trouble.
Right.
That, I think the Triumph will struggle to get you into trouble because it doesn't have a large amount of performance delivered to you suddenly. It's a linear power curve. It's a good advantage to have. And the Harley-Davidson doesn't require you to do lots of work to feel the performance. So you can go slower and have that sensation. So I think all of the four motorcycles, the Classic 350, Duke 390, Speed 400 or Harley X440, I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. Okay. Bharat Kumar KB1TJ has asked, what is the maximum usable RPM and where does the red line start? Are the gear ratios short or long? Can we expect a Tiger 400X in the future?
I think the Tiger 400X is almost a definite. I've now increasingly coming back to the conclusion that had they launched the Tiger 400 now, there'd be a lot more buzz about it. But there'd be no dealers to serve the buzz out of. And I think Triumph has strategically decided that it's a, let's call it a distraction, but the Speed 400, Scrambler 400, Classic 350, all of this drama is going to happen. In the background, they'll build out the showrooms. And once they have a reasonable number of showrooms ready, that's when the Tiger 400 comes and capitalizes on the fact that now you have distribution.
Correct.
Right? As to the questions about gearing is long, etc., honestly, we've ridden the motorcycle in the wet outside the city for 150 kilometers. I wouldn't want to offer an opinion just yet. I don't see a reason why this will be a discussion at all because the bike felt completely happy and pleasant with no hiccups anywhere. Usable revs will be lower than you think. Again, I think it was an early production motorcycle, so I still don't think this is final production quality, but it was disappointing because 6.5 onwards, there's quite a bit of complaining going on before the engine revs out. It does rev out. So just hold your horses, let the bike come to us for a test. We'll be a lot clearer about these things then.
Manish Reddy 5112. It's a long question, but an interesting one. We need an answer for why Triumph and Harley 440 are partnering with our Indian manufacturers and selling them to us in the Indian market at an approachable price tag. What is going to be the after sales concern? Why are premium segment companies looking to capture the market in a smart way? And as a customer and motorcycle enthusiast, it sounds amazing. The product is good and pricing is decent. But what is the point after all, Shumi sir? We really need an explanation from you. Hope you would reply. Okay.
Okay, look. The reason why Hero and Harley, KTM and Bajaj, Triumph and TVS and BMW, etc., the reason is the simplest thing ever, okay? The Chinese figured out how to make really cheap motorcycles at really poor quality. So if you look at Africa as an example, they used to treat their motorcycles more or less as use and throw motorcycles, where you'd buy dirt cheap and then you'd just toss the motorcycle when it was done, right? What the Indian guys figured out is to not let the quality levels fall that far because the Indian customer is quality conscious and we have never been a use and throw culture. We just don't do it. Right. You know how if I wear out a shirt and it's not torn, it's just old, then you give it to your maid and then somebody in their family will use it. And if it's not torn at the end, it'll go like that, right?
Night t-shirt.
In fact, my neighbors have a 6-year-old. That 6-year-old is using clothes from 3 or 4 6-year-olds before that.
Yeah.
And they've kept so well these clothes that 6-year-olds post that will continue to use those clothes and nobody will buy like a new pair of clothes. We are that culture, right?
Absolutely.
So what the Indian motorcycle manufacturers have figured out is how to do those quality levels, which are not world-class quality levels, and I'm upset about that, but they are very good quality levels. At a reasonable price.
Yeah.
So what KTM can't do by themselves, BMW hasn't figured out by themselves, Triumph clearly hasn't figured out by themselves, is and Harley-Davidson, is how to get that kind of scale, make that many motorcycles, bring them to India, sell them at an acceptable price, while maintaining a semblance of a quality standard at the very minimum. And that's why the partnerships are critical. And to me, it is the way going forward. Aprilia is trying to build a 400cc motorcycle. You can bet that the price will not fall in this ballpark.
Yeah.
I'll give you the other side of the example. If you look at the Suzuki Gixxers, it's so high quality that it is exported from here to Japan as is. They don't make two specs. The Gixxer 250 is built for Japan in India at the same spec as what they sell in India. And it's what? It's 20% more expensive or 30% more expensive or something like that. That's the difference in the ability to create quality experiences without having it cost that much.
Right.
I believe that this will only change when our incomes go up to a level where we are far more quality and experience sensitive rather than price sensitive. That might happen as soon as 5 or 8 years from now, depending on how our economy grows. But today, can Triumph build this motorcycle in the UK, find a local manufacturing partner, and create this kind of pricing by themselves? No, they can't. It's the only way forward.
And I think a great point, great outcome of this will be our expectations will be higher.
Yes.
Now, from every motorcycle in this segment saying that if Triumph can deliver this quality
Yes.
at 2.3 lakh rupees, why can't you? Right?
Absolutely.
I think that has to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay. Jitendra Sood 5606 has asked, is it a better proposition over the CB350 RS and Dominar?
Why don't you answer that?
Let me think about it. Yes. You want to add anything?
Yeah, look, I'm not a fan of the Dominar. I've not recommended a single one in all of its existence because I don't know why Bajaj built that motorcycle, what its job is. And there are usability issues like why is it so heavy? Why does it steer like that? And I think it desperately needs an update. More importantly, I'm not going to start recommending Dominars today. CB350, I think mutually both of us can't understand why Honda would build that motorcycle.
It's not a Honda.
Yeah, as I wrote in one of my Instagram posts, I think I said if you're going to repeat history because you're creating a retro motorcycle, at least choose your own history instead of somebody else's. Right? So, can I recommend both of those two motorcycles? No, and that automatically makes the Speed 400 an easier recommendation than those two.
Okay. Dastan Raza Khan has asked, is it suitable for somebody who's 5 feet 4?
Yes. Remember what I said about the seat feeling so narrow that my butt was sort of off the seat? It's a good thing for a short rider because it means that your legs are not going to get splayed wide. They're going to be quite close to the motorcycle in that sense. So not only is the saddle height not too high, I think it'll also feel even narrower and more controllable because of it. But for anybody who's watching who think that they are short and can't access a certain kind of motorcycle, Google it. You will discover that riding tall bikes is a skill. It's not a disability. You can learn how to get past it. And once you do, then you can ride any motorcycle you like and never have to ask a question about saying that saddle height or this size, can I deal with it? Trust me, you can.
A lot of queries regarding the Scrambler. Should we take it up?
Too bad, how sad.
Sorry, you're going to have to pass.
The Scrambler situation is this. It's got a tiny amount of more suspension travel. It's a slightly larger looking motorcycle. It's got completely useless handguards on it, which are absolutely going to do nothing. And it's obviously going to be more expensive. I'm expecting a price of about 2.5 lakh rupees ex showroom, which is about 15,000 rupees more than the Speed 400. More details will come in a couple of months. We'll ride the motorcycle also in a couple of months. So I'd say hold your horses. If you've already made pre-bookings, you want to sit on the pre-booking, please go for it. Or go once the Speed 400 drives and take a test ride of at least this motorcycle to get a sense of what you're getting into, because I don't think the engine character is going to change significantly. But outside of that, honestly, we can't see anything because we haven't ridden that bike.
Okay. Interesting question. Omi 21514. Would this be an upgrade for someone who owns a Hunter? He's just bought a Hunter and he's thinking of upgrading. That's
No.
just
No. It won't be an upgrade. Look, I believe at an upgrade is roughly 2 times the horsepower, and a change is something in the vicinity. Okay, so you're going from a 20-something bhp bike, which is the Hunter, to a 40 bhp bike, and it'll feel like an upgrade. But remember that this 40 bhp bike was created to rival the classic 350, which effectively is a Hunter with larger wheels, right? So I don't see that you will get a significant change in your experience from it, and therefore, if you've just bought a Hunter, I don't see any reason why you should be spending money on the Triumph 400. Wait. When the Tiger 400 comes, which is a change of format, there might be a more interesting thing in there for you. Or when the Classic 650 comes out, there might be a more interesting motorcycle in that for you, where at least you've got a second cylinder and a sense of a different size and stuff. But from here to the Triumph, it's going to feel like a very superior Hunter, but it's not going to feel fundamentally different. 1717, retro, talk. I don't see it. I wouldn't spend that money.
How much, Rishikesh K has asked, how much of Triumph DNA do these bikes have? It's a great way to round off our conversation.
That begs the question, what is Triumph DNA? I don't know.
You're an ex-owner.
Yeah, I failed to discover the DNA, so I sold it. No, look, it in my head, 2 days removed from riding that motorcycle, I remember that I rode a very nicely made, extremely well suspended, pleasant motorcycle. That's all I remember of it. Do I make direct links to the Street Twin? No. Speed? No. Street Triple? No. So I don't have a way of connecting this. Like, for example, the X440 is very connectable to the Harley-Davidson lineup, at least in the sound, if nothing else, at least in the way it delivers power, if nothing else. But remember that Triumph's challenge is it's a versatile brand. It does many things, and it does many of those things really well. So from that perspective, is there a way for me to pinpoint saying, it does that, and that is a Triumph thing to do? Not really, no.
So I'm going to just add one thing here that, whenever we've discussed Triumphs, he's been very clear about his hesitation about how they've handled service
Yeah.
and from an ownership standpoint. And I always feel so drawn to Triumphs because they engineer their bikes so well, irrespective of what segment they're playing in. They end up making machines that really work so well. And the Street Triple is a brilliant example of that. You've been an owner and you were not happy with what that was. But as a motorcycle, fantastic, right? But in this case, he seems to be coming away from it saying that it's good.
Yeah, it's a very, very accurate description. I wish it had more persona, so you'd connect to it a lot more. You know how the Street Twin or the Bonnie, you ride the Bonnie, you have a sense of, yeah, this is something. I don't have a...
I still remember the first time I rode the Street Twin. Street Twin. I rode it and I was like, wow, this is...
Yeah, so I don't have a feeling like that about the Speed 400, unfortunately. I think it's the one thing that they've missed out. They could have done better, however you want to put it. On the service front, now I am hopeful. So while Triumph Motorcycles India was running the Triumph dealership network, the service, we've heard horror stories, frankly, all over the place, and lots of them. It was an inconsistent experience. Some people had a great time, many people didn't. Now, the same guys who created the KTM service network are in charge, as far as I can tell, of running the KTM service setup as well.
The Triumph setup.
And I'm very, very happy about it because I know that KTM services heart is in the right place. They try really hard to help customers.
Right.
The social media image may not be consistent with that or consonant with that, but I think they try really hard. So I think now the Triumph service experience will start improving, and that's not just good for the Speed 400 guys. It's true for all the guys who already have Triumphs as well. So to me, it's a good thing that Bajaj has stepped into this game and taken over because when we did that FAQ about N160, I think, Bajaj service was rated really highly by the customers. Even we were surprised at how positive the response was. KTM service, I personally experienced it and among a lot of our friends, and we've hardly ever struggled with it without making calls to Bajaj and saying, help me, I'm stuck, right? So if that experience transfers to Triumph, it'll be a sea change for what those customers have gone through over the last so many years. So I'm super kicked about it.
Okay. Last question.
Oh, one more.
Last one. It will be the perfect way to end it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Techie Bhatta has asked, he's asked several questions. I'm just going to go with one. Should one book the Triumph Speed 400 in advance or wait till the KTM 390 2023 comes?
I don't believe booking anything in advance is a good idea. I just cannot recommend it. I cannot understand the need to book a motorcycle without riding it. I mean, I'd love, if I'm opening a pastry shop tomorrow, I'd love to have customers like you who'll show up 3 years before I deliver the first pastry and put orders anyway, because it's like guaranteed happiness business. But yeah, no, I would wait. And honestly, if you're thinking 390 or Speed 400, maybe I'd use that waiting time to clarify my head about what I want, because you're asking for two very, very dramatically different things.
Yeah. On paper, it wouldn't have seemed that way. That's the
No,
thing.
because if the 390 carries forward to where it is going and it becomes more refined and mature, it will absolutely kick ass, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Speed 400 is not that kind of mood at all. The Speed 400 is like, it's calm, it's chill, it does a reasonably good job of a whole bunch of things. And the only thing I have a real complaint about is why it doesn't rev out to its red line with more happiness and grace. That's it. So I don't know that I'd ever put the Speed 400 and the 390 Duke in the same category of things at all.
Right. So, is there a clear answer for you guys to whether you should buy a Speed 400 or not? Is a bit complicated.
No, it's not complicated. Get your expectations right.
Okay.
Don't think of it as a 40 bhp bike. You'll be fine. If you go to the dealership to take a test ride thinking you're about to ride a 40 bhp bike, you will have problems with the delivery of the experience.
These are the complications.
Right? So to me, go there saying, I'm going to ride a nice, fast sports bike that does a whole bunch of things really well. And yes, you will have a very nice experience, I think. But if you go there saying, dude, just like the 390 but retro flavored, no, I'm sorry, but you're going to be disappointed with it.
Couple of friends messaged saying, we all grew up with the 390 Duke, but we've gotten older. We are 10 years older now. Maybe this is the motorcycle as older people to ride now. Something that's calmer, but still quick in that.
Call your friends and tell them motorcyclists don't grow old.
They don't.
It's the fountain of youth.
On that note, let's wrap it up. If you have any more questions about the Speed 400 or any of the other motorcycles that we've spoken about, do let us know in the comments and we'll get back to you. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.